Okay, we are live and it is it's on a Wednesday morning and the last day of March. We have Representative Diane Lamphere from the House Transportation Committee that has joined us this morning. Welcome, Diane. And we have, I don't know if you've met all of our folks. We have Senator Ingalls, Essex Orleans. We got Senator Chittenden from Chittenden. We got Senator Perchlik from Washington and Senator Kitchell from Caledonia and myself. So thank you for taking the time to visit us and tell us a little something about the bill as it left the House. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Senator Kitchell has.
Okay, she joined us. She has to feed the cat every morning, so she's responsible for a cat. So
I've fed Henry. I've filed my Secretary of State's report for the Danville Chamber of Commerce, and I've been working on emails. And I apologize. I got.
that's all
I've
right.
been working on another proposal for free meals. So
All right.
other than that, I've done nothing this morning.
Okay, Representative Lamphere, tell us all the wonderful work you did in the House on the bill. Is there
So I
anything you have to
apologize.
change?
I'm late. Are we online?
Yes, we are. We're live. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, good morning, committee, and thank you so much for the invitation to come over and speak with you. I do hope that next year this will happen in the building. Many of the senators I have at least served in the other body and have known for many years. As a matter of fact, Governor Phil Scott, when he was on transportation, was my first year, was kind enough to provide me some spreadsheets that were very, very informative. And that was my first introduction to then Senator Scott. But for the record, this is Representative Diane Lamphere. I am currently the chair of the House Transportation Committee and welcome this opportunity to talk about H433, which all of us, been in the House for 13 years, 6 years on transportation and 6 years on appropriation. And I used to be the transportation person on appropriations, and now I'm the appropriations person on transportation. So there's a great deal of joy in my heart because I'm very passionate about it, that I feel like this change is really allowed me to come home to a place where I have a great deal of comfort and joy and can bring some cross-committee talk that is necessary for a lot of translation that needs to occur to understand. And I think the whole bodies would benefit greatly from a lot more of that type of activity. But I wanted to say that in all my time, this is the first year that I have served where we've had maybe not a lot of money, but we have a little. We have some breath. This has never happened before this year. So it was with caution that we approached this budget, along with some great delight around what we could potentially do with it, and with some certain skepticism around some things that, you never know what might pop up. But in the bill, overall, and I know that I don't need to walk through the bill. You're going to have Ledge Council and the JFO go into all of that. But if you have any of that, any questions around that, I'd welcome that and defer to them for some more expertise around that. But in general, this bill does some good things. It sufficiently funds the transportation programs and projects for FY22. And some of them you'll notice is when I say sufficient, not in excess, but there is something in particularly in the maintenance is way above over past years amounts to the tune of it's some could say 3 million up, could be 4 million up, but there's some good funding within there. We also invest and expand some of the incentive programs that help Vermonters. And that has always been sort of like, how far can we go to help Vermonters transition to a more electrified mobility and a more cost-effective mobility for them, and help to limit our greenhouse gases. So all of the programs that that the past committees in transportation have put into practice around incentives for electric cars and incentives for moving to a more high mileage vehicle are still all in there, and they're supported. They're supported at a level that funds them for at least for FY22, but not overdone. But we'll have to keep an eye on those programs as they advance to make sure that there is enough. But I think we've done a fairly good job of hitting the Goldilocks amount of not too much and not too little on those. But you may hear differently. We also use the federal funds that have come to us for investments, and we don't use it all. There's reserve, there's a significant, or at least for me, a significant amount of money that is left for FY23. Those funds that we received in December, you'll hear that there was, and the 50.4 million, which came directly to the agency or to the state, is outside of what was given to airports and public transit and linking up. That money, I believe, is put to very good use. It is extremely flexible. It has a long lifespan to 2024. There is no reason that we need to overdo and there's a good amount of it that's saved for next year. And I was speaking with the senator watching this morning. I know that it's been many years that we hear about an infrastructure bill coming out of DC, but this morning just heard some of the numbers of the preview of what might be coming out today, at least in an announcement. So we'll have to all keep our eyes on what that is.
Representative Lanfear, if I could ask a question. You made reference to the federal money that came out in the budget adjustment. We spent some of it. I think it was like 1.6 or 7. And you said because it doesn't all have to be spent, out of the 50.4, you said you kept some in the kitty for 23. Do you use about half? I was just wondering how much you left in the cookie jar there.
There is 15 million plus in the cookie jar for FY23. The agency and our JFO will show you where they have a plan for it. And you're right, Senator, as always, it was 1.660 was used in to fill. And then in this one, I believe it is about 20. So of the 50, if I think we had about 13, well, that's the difference. We used 28 in FY22, and there was 20. And then we have a plan, with your blessing, to use some of that in FY22, not too much and not too little, and still leaving $15 million for FY23, which JFO will walk you through exactly what that is. They have incredibly good.
Kind of the Goldilocks approach, not too much, not too little.
I hope so. I hope so, ma'am. It was one of the incentive programs that I know all Vermonters are anxious to see us invest more in, where we're going with electric vehicles. But having, just so you have in the background, where we came at the number that we did, there was some people that would invest more, which is true, and we might need more, but having testimony from Drive Electric Vermont, and their website has I call it their marathon chart that shows how much money they have left all the time. So I check that to see that they're down to like 300,000 for this right now of the spending, and they might run out before we catch up with them with this budget. But they testified that they could use, or I call it the burn rate through, of anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 a month is what they have the capacity that they believe to move. So the amount of money that we put into that program would have a rate of about 233,000. So it is not terribly overfunded, but it is actually more than what they predict that they could go through in a month. And that was as far as we went. And that's actually including, I think the governor had 2.25 million in that program, and we increased it by $1 million to that 3.25 with that expectation that the amount that goes directly to the incentive program minus administration and minus the piece that would actually get us to about whether maybe $220,000 to $230,000 a month ability to pace. So we watched their website. They have an enormous amount of great information, and it's an easy place to navigate. So the other place that we strongly support it was our local, with this opportunity and with one-time dollars, like we did last year. In this bill, we provide for the town highway aid at its regular statutory amount, which is around 27 million. And we increased that by 3 million to 31 million. And JFO has a nice chart of what that would mean for communities. That's a one-time investment. But in the class 2 and class 2 roadway, the town grant program and the town structures program, historically, I think it's been someone, Senator Westman was my original chair when we actually increased that amount the last time. But if you recall, last year we paused those programs because of COVID, put extra dollars in the town highway aid. So now you're going to see the pausing being brought up to not only the statutory rate, but actually almost double the amount that's in there. So the governor's recommend healthily supports that for the towns. We took a look at whether or not that was the right amount, in talking to the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns to figure out how to support the towns to be able to move this. Would we increase it for a couple of years? Would we take the cap? There was a couple of options, which would make it extraordinarily confusing to manage if you tried to do this for 2 years and then go back, and then certain towns would be a part of the cycle and others would be left out, and it would get messy quickly. So we left the governor's recommend on the programs, but what we decided to do was, with the help of the league's investigation of their communities, as to how we could be of assistance with this, we followed their recommendation where we would increase the cap, which statutorily for the town class 2 roadway is at 175,000 a grant. So we increased it to 200,000. Now they did recommend that anywhere from 200 to 300 would be nice, but we didn't go too far down that road, but we increased it permanently, not just for a 2-year cycle. So, I mean, we could have gone 250 for a 2-year cycle, but I think it's more conservative to stay.
It never goes back. It never goes back. Once you put the money in, you never take it back. That's my fear all the time, because we talk about a sunset. I've never seen a sunset yet go back, because once they're used to it, it's tough.
Right. And then how do you say you've got it at 2? Yeah.
Right.
We made a move in there statutorily to go to 200,000. Now, statutorily, the town structures is not written in law, but it is followed practice that is the same. So we did not have to actually make that change verbatim in the bill, but it is understood that those two programs would track at that match rate. We also kicked around and had a conversation then about how, if you increase the max amount, you're going to decrease how many grants you can put out into the state. So it would actually feel like maybe a reduction of one community might not be able to have it that year because of that. I call it spreading the peanut butter. Maybe, we concentrated it here, but it's making a reduction in the number of grants. So a back of the envelope, if we could get 36 grants done at 175,000, how much would we have to raise the statutory amount to stay at 200 to get 36 grants? And so you'll see in the bill that we make a small, but sometimes it's a pretty good adjustment to the permanent statutory amount for those programs in the out years. So as you said, sir, this year we don't need to, because it's way covered. But in the out years, you have to be clear that is something that would be a pressure that's not there particularly today. But that's where we landed. And we feel like the last time that had been even raised, and hearing from industry and from select boards and from town crews as to the cost of projects that have gone up over the last decade of this, it felt like an appropriate adjustment. Well, it needed an adjustment. Appropriate some may differ on that. They might want it more for that cost, but we made an advancement. And so I feel like we've supported the towns significantly. I would say that, well, maybe not to my surprise out of the committee, but this bill was supported on an 11-0 vote out of our committee, which is indicative of the work of working between ourselves. What did surprise me is it got a 100% unanimous vote off the floor. That's new. that was nice. That's not what I'm used to, sir. But so I feel like there was trust in our work, and that we heard from people, and we made those adjustments. There's a couple of other things besides the support on the dollars that there are things in here that don't have dollars, which is there was a good discussion around work zones and safety issues. We've had flagmen. We have employees that work out there in very vulnerable positions that are in danger of some drivers, not all, that are not following the best guidelines of how they maybe want to be driving through work zones, and has been very disruptive, and in some cases have had loss of life. So there was a discussion around, I think the agency had brought forward or something to put in an automated traffic warning system, so that if you went through and you were clocked at over 10 miles an hour by this machine, you would get a warning in the mail from an AI. There was not comfort, committee, in our committee or in judiciary to start to go down this type of road. And as people might say, New Jersey has it, Pennsylvania has it, New York does it all the time. That good for them. But we weren't ready for that. And if it's a matter of other things, but we do want to recognize that there are issues from that. And we came to land on the fact of actually working with the people involved to seek a study for this that you'll see in the bill and get back to us. I know judiciary had looked at it, and government ops had looked at it as well in our thing. We also have, we are looking at the completion of the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail in a few years. And the report that came out that we heard from Commissioner Snyder and the agency, there's a report that came out in January around that and plan that is very exciting to see, especially in this time post-COVID. Vermont has a few opportunities for, and this is where I agree with the governor's investment in outdoor recreation, put a significant amount of money in outdoor recreation as Vermonters and others come here to enjoy what we have every day. And in that report there, in the out years, looks at what it would take to maintain that road. And it's a beautiful asset that Vermont owns, that we lease for many, or at least a couple seasons, and people have been invested in this since I think the 90s. It's a long story, which many of you are very familiar with, and it's very near total completion. And as I was reading that report, it's predicted, although it's predicted, that as many as 250,000 people a year might come. Wow. I know that I'm looking forward to it now. I can't wait.
They're all going to end up on Jane's front lawn. There you go.
That's right. You go right by Marty's and he'll
benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Maybe if I start from your side. I don't know if I can get there from, if I start on this side of the state.
yeah, the St. Johnsbury to West Danville, Joe's Pond was one of the first segments. So we've had the benefit of the trail. So it's quite a treasure. And I'm going to say it again. I've said it before. Senator Mazza deserves a lot of credit because when that trail was acquired, there was a lot of criticism that that was not a prudent use of public funds. So I would say the vision and understanding of that value to the public. And I guess that was back when Howard Dean was governor. Is that right, Dick?
Right.
So it's interesting. Everybody is now applauding and visualizing the benefit of it. But when the original decision to acquire the property was made, it was not without detractors. I am aware of that. So we've got to thank the people who were in the legislature back then to be willing to step forward.
Yeah.
So when we get done, Senator Mazza is going to cut the ribbon on the completed
right.
trail, and he's going to cut the ribbon on the Western Corridor, and
Yeah, we're
a few
gonna
other
ride the
things.
train.
Oh, and maybe when the train goes to Montreal, because he's been a very patient chair.
And the
Yeah.
drawbridge.
Oh, and the drawbridge. Oh, yeah, forgot that. Oh, mhm.
Yeah, right.
Don't
Yeah.
forget the Costco exit.
Yeah, actually, oh, Newport spoke out. Look at the
I have-
scene behind the senator this morning. Look at that. Wow.
Oh yeah, that shows Vermont. You got to really look, but you can see. I think you can see the dome at the Capitol.
Oh, can you see my store anywhere? No?
I think I can. I think I can.
Okay, sorry, Diane. We get interrupted and have a little fun.
That's quite right. There are many things to be excited about, and the legacy from how it got to here is. I would agree with Senator Kitchell that the vision back in the 90s and the 2000s to see this as something of extreme value was well founded, as well as maybe the same thing with the rail, back in '64, not getting rid of the Western Corridor, which is before you arrived, I think, Senator, we were chatting about how maybe, because we're getting close to the arrival to Burlington, of inviting some dignitaries from DC to come that day. And I think somebody had mentioned we have.
That'll be fun.
Amtrak.
Thank God when the series we talked about Howard Dean back when we had the silent crossings from Burlington, Shelburne, Shalott, how we got ridiculed. Oh my God, we got beat on pretty bad from the national press and everything. And thank God we did it back then, because it'd be very challenging today to do those things. It's just, and thank God that the rail beds were preserved, because there's a lot of thought about breaking them up, and you'd never have those trails today without that railroad.
Oh, and I go by the train station here, Virgins Ferrisburg, with the park and ride, and with its completion, that platform is magnificent and the building is breathtaking. You'll have to come and visit. We are still looking for a tenant, and I am convinced, senators, that at some point when I retire, I will be working there. Like Chuck Bohai down in White River Junction, that I will be there. Welcome to Virgins, and how I can give you a ride to wherever you need to
Be the
be.
perfect person.
I will keep the coffee hot
There you go.
and the bathroom's well stocked. Anyway, there is a lot to be grateful for, but we also know that in the coming years, looking out in the next couple of years, if be here next year, there'll be some challenges that will be returning after this, when we know that our funding is structurally strained and doesn't necessarily get the job done. And as we start to come to terms with a different way of mobility, how do we continue to maintain our roads, bridges, infrastructure in a way that we would like them to be maybe in a whole different way of funding.
Okay, very, very good overview. Any questions at this time? She's covered a lot of territory. Yes, Senator Perchlik.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Lanford. That on that last point, did you say that there's some language in the bill about that, or just that was something that the committee's looking at? Because I know AOT was talking about looking at a different, like a vehicle miles traveled fee pilot or something. So is that in
That-
there, a study, or?
Senator, that is not in here. I know that I have actually served with Senator Kitchell on a funding study back in 2012 that it has been looked at in the past. I think it'll be looked at again in the future. Oregon, I'm familiar with when they started their pilot, and other states have. And how do we, I think there's desire for that direction. And is it vehicle miles, or do we go straight up transportation utility? There's a lot of different ways, but not in this bill right now. I think coming out of what I'm hanging a hat on in the future is going to be there's the Climate Council is something I'm watching. We are a part of what was the TCI. We're taking let's look at how this works in other states. So there's some of that, but that isn't going to get the whole job done as far as this goes. So I look forward to advancing some realities around changing.
Further questions?
I have one other question.
Sure, go ahead.
And that is on the safety. Did you guys talk all about the lighted paddles?
Yeah, that's right. We put that through last year.
Yeah, and when you're talking about safety, instead of the plate ticketing system, you guys talk about that at all?
No, I'm sorry, Senator. That
We put
is
that through last year.
lighted paddles. Oh, like at
Yes, the paddle
Okay.
all lit with lights going around it. I saw it last year at one site somewhere, and we brought it up in our committee and made it a practice to do that, but I haven't seen them used yet, so,
They were
I
going to
have
use
say
them.
that I would find that as a visual person extremely helpful, because
Yeah.
sometimes I look at a work zone and there's so many people, I don't know who to look at
right.
for,
right, yeah.
for direction. Is he backing a truck up? Is he telling me?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we should get a report. I think we should call them the Mazda paddles.
The other one, they get your attention. I hope they're using them. That's a good question, because I was curious to see whether I know they didn't want to spend any money on them. I know that was one of the issues, but if we're talking about saving lives and what we're doing for those poor folks that are directing
Well,
traffic.
and I think that actually the cost would be borne by the construction
Right,
company
right.
because
Overall
they're
package, that's right.
contracting for, I mean, obviously it all gets paid. There's no such thing as a free lunch, remember?
No, that's right. Jane gives those free lunches and appropriations. But
Oh, that's
don't
true.
come
Mine
along.
are free. I forgot that.
Don't, Senator Kitchell, don't tell Senator Starr that about that
Yeah.
no free lunches.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know.
Oh, my God. Don't go there. Oh, my God. Oh,
I've had the pleasure of her raspberry jam as well.
me too. I miss that. Gosh, I don't get that anymore, Oh, boy. Really should keep us all going supplied.
I know I had 28 jars. It was a very effective technique to get people to complete a questionnaire.
Oh, I've got
And I made good on my promise.
any
You
bill
did.
you wanted passed, I passed it as long as I got some jelly. I can be bought. Okay, well, thank you very much, Representative, and that was a good overview, and it gives us something to look forward to as we go through the bill.
Thank you. And know that I'm here, and my vice chair is terrific, Representative Butch Shaw, that as we start to lend, when you said paddles, because now we're about knee deep in the water of your DMV bill about boats. So,
Oh, boy, that's Senator Pertuk, that's Senator Ingles. He's our boat person,
oh, we could, yeah. So we're getting deep into that now. And so to figure out, look forward to other communications with you as we start to land these two bills on our way out to some spring training, right?
Good. Thank you again. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm going to head back to the committee with your
Sure.
permission.
Yeah.
Because they're taking bills off the wall this morning that I maybe,
Uh-oh, watch out.
yeah, I need to go. All right. Thank you
Pleasure
very
to-
much.
Pleasure
Thank
to meet you.
You too,
Thank you.
sir.
Okay, we have Chris Root, or we have Anthea. Who would like to go next?
I think Chris was going to do the side by side on the
Okay.
money in terms
Good,
of
good, Chris.
changes.
That's great. Okay, Chris, good morning.
Morning. For the record, my name is Chris Roop, and I'm a fiscal analyst with the Joint Fiscal Office. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Lori, Liz has uploaded several documents to the committee website today, and if it pleases the committee, I'll just spend a few minutes walking through them. They're all very brief. Bear with me just one second. All right, can everybody see this chart okay?
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
Mhm.
So fortunately, as Chair Lanford said, the House really did not make very many changes to the governor's recommend for the FY22 transportation program. Changes are really limited to a few sections of the bill. And I identified those sections in the red numbers here. So the changes, I'll start with the AOT one-time section, and I'll get into some further details about this next. But the governor's recommend included $5 million in one-time funds for electric vehicle incentive programs. The House increased that by $4.775 million to a total of $9.775 million.
Hey,
So,
Chris,
Yeah.
can
Go
you
ahead.
just tell me what document this is? So because I'd
I'm
rather.
sorry,
open
I
one.
believe this is
can't really see
the fourth document in the list, I believe.
The T-bill is passed by the House summary.
Correct.
Thank you.
So the red numbers show where the changes are, and these italicized items here underneath the AOT one time roll up into that 9.775. So that 9.775 million includes the $3 million boost, one-time boost to town highway aid that the chair referenced, $3.25 million for the new PEV incentive program. And, you know, I know this can be confusing, but it's not a new program, it's an existing program. The new refers to the fact that it helps you buy a new PEV vehicle. There's $600,000 for the Mileage Smart program, $375,000 for the emission repair program, $1.5 million for a new Replace Your Ride program, $50,000 for electric motor assisted bike incentives, and $1 million for a level 2 electric vehicle charger grants. So these one-time items roll up into that 9.775 total. So you may wonder, well, where did you find the extra money to pay for this? You know, there's a difference of 4.775 million over the governor's recommend. Where the House found the money is down here in the maintenance line. If you take a look, the total amount of appropriations for maintenance is the same and consistent with what the governor recommend, $103,519,499. Where the extra 4.775 million came from was by swapping out some federal funds to free up T-fund dollars. So you can see in these columns here, this first red number shows that the House version reduced the proposed T-fund appropriation for maintenance by 4.775. So that's how you go from 92.5 million to 87.7 million, and then made an equal increase in the federal appropriation from 10.9 to 15.7. So overall, the same amount of money is proposed to be appropriated for maintenance. The only difference is 4.775 million more will come from federal dollars to free up that amount of money in T-fund that can be reprogrammed in the one-time line.
So Chris, did that 4.75 come out of that 50.4
Exactly.
federal grant?
Exactly. And right after we get off of this sheet, I'll show the committee the FHWA funding proposal and how that change is reflected. But you know, those funds, I think we're really blessed that and very fortunate that Washington passed these funds back in December with a great deal of flexibility. The funds were intended to help states offset the economic impacts from the pandemic. And as we all know, you know, our transportation revenues are down because people are driving less due to stay-at-home orders and working from home and the various economic restrictions. So fortunately, these funds have a great deal of flexibility, and they can be used for maintenance activities in ways that your typical federal formula funds cannot be. And they can also be used at 100% federal share all the way till the end of federal fiscal year 24. So these funds do provide us a great deal of flexibility. They are not, however, as flexible as our T fund dollars, which is why that the House proposed that we pay for these one-time items using the T fund and not the federal dollars directly, but using those federal dollars to cover more eligible maintenance activities, thereby allowed T fund dollars to be freed up. So those are the most significant changes between the governor's recommend and the House passed version. If you go down to the bottom here, you can see here that overall, the total budget increased by 4.775 million from 680.8 to 685.5. These numbers right next to it, the 282, that's the T fund appropriation, stays the same. We're not spending any more T fund than the administration proposed, and the T fund is balanced. But that increase, that 4.775, is reflected here in the federal appropriation. So the governor's recommend proposed 356.2 in federal appropriations, and the House increased that by 4.775 million to the 360. There's no other changes that were made to the governor's recommend to the AOT transportation program beyond what you see there. Before I move on, are there any other questions?
Yeah, well, I can't.
Go ahead.
Is it all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. When you go back up to the areas where they're swapping out and using, for example, obviously town highway aid, it's a way of helping towns that have been hammered. So I'm sure they'll be happy to have a little bit more town highway aid, at least knowing that we're not changing the base. The new incentive program, is that really new, or is that modifying the incentive program that we already have in place?
That's a great question. For the new PEV incentive program, it is an existing program, but as Representative Lanford mentioned, they're spending through the money that they've already had appropriated. And if you go on Drive Electric Vermont's website, you can see in real time how much money is left for these incentives. So this is an increase.
Well, we just have a plethora of new programs. So that's all I wanted to clarify, because that it was really providing the funding based on actual spending experience for the program we have now. Did it expand eligibility?
My colleague over in Legislative Council may be better versed in the language. I don't believe it expanded the eligibility, but it may have. So I don't want to speak out of school. I admittedly focus a little bit more on making the numbers work and a little less on the policy implications.
Okay. Emissions and okay, e-bike, that is new.
Correct. That would be the language proposes creating a new incentive program. It's $50,000 for several hundred incentives that would be administered similar to the new PEV incentive program. Replace Your Ride, I believe, is a new program, and the emissions repair program, I believe, is new. Everything else and obviously the level 2 charger grant sort of build on some of the existing.
I think Replace Your Ride is a continuation. It was getting rid of, is that new, Andy? I thought it was getting rid of the higher mileage cars and swapping them out for lower, for gas guzzlers for better mileage, but not necessarily a EV or a hybrid.
That's what it is, but it's a new program.
Well, we not being created, it's already existed. We created it last year.
We created the Mileage Smart program last year, which is there for 600,000.
Okay, Replace Your Ride is totally new. It's hard to keep them all straight. We did Mileage Smart. Okay, that's the replacement for high mileage. Okay.
My only concern is we're addressing the electric vehicle incentives and we want people to go, but we still haven't figured out a way to collect our revenues from switching from gasoline to electric. And that bothers me a lot because I want to incentivize electric vehicles, but we still haven't. There's two issues that bother me. One, we need more charging stations, and we need to get a piece of that action of that electric before it continues on and on and on, because we're not addressing that at all. And we're just going to decline our gasoline revenues, and that's good probably, but we got to find a way to collect off the electric, and we're not doing that at all.
And I've been lobbying kind of lobbying, or they're lobbying me, the electric departments, VEC in particular, and Green Mountain Power a little bit. And I've tried to get them to take ownership of it, and they don't want to. They and I just think that's the correct way to do it. They can't figure out this, or they can't figure out that with these smart meters. Well, anyways, I hear you, Senator Mazza, and I agree wholeheartedly. And we just got to figure out a way.
I talked to Peter Welch the other day, and they're talking about a mileage. I said, Peter, that doesn't work because you don't get the tourists in your state. You don't get. It's very difficult. You have to subdivide your across the country traveling like truckers do now, and it would be very complicated. And what we need is when you charge your vehicle, you get 3 pennies or whatever it is,
Right.
and
Same
thing.
Same as a gasoline tax. The same thing, same idea.
We're not addressing that anywhere, and I don't know what we can do about that. Maybe it's just my concern.
I don't, we've had a lot of discussion. If you're using one of the commercial charging stations, that's really simple. It's home charging where you, where we have the challenges, I guess. And the advocates have been saying the tipping point should be when we have 15% of our vehicles that are EVs. I don't know what we are about now, 2, I think. It's still pretty small. So now's the time to figure it out. But we've been at this for quite a while. Remember, I've forgotten that Diane and I were in 2012, did she say?
We're going to wake up and find a lot of electric vehicles.
The problem of waiting is that if you just wait, it just gets forgotten.
Yeah.
And I mean, what better time than to make it right now? I mean, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna figure out how, when you charge an electric car, that we're gonna get a few pennies out of it. I just don't believe in waiting.
Well, I'm only citing the testimony that we've had from
Absolutely.
organizations. The one thing is whenever you implement it, the larger the percentage, the bigger the shock.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if I could chime in on this, I completely agree with what Senator Kitchell was just saying, that we don't want to stop the electrification. So that's why I think people are not ready to enact those types of fees. But you're absolutely right on the horizon. I've heard you be dismissive of sunsetting. I'm curious, does the legislature ever enact a sunrise, where 5 years from now, where we would pass a law that 5 years from now, the electrical fees would start to trigger, so that people know well in advance that starting 5 years from now, there will be an electrical surcharge on the charging station?
But we have to start talking about it today, because this is the time that we're encouraging people to buy electric. I was at a dealer the other day. There's a $40,000 electric vehicle on a hybrid. Matter of fact, you could buy it for $28,000, $12,000 off. That's a big incentive. And that's great. But on the other hand, we're encouraging people to buy these. We want to do it, but we're not getting a return for our investment if they're going to use our highways. And that's a nationwide issue. And I don't think nobody's addressing it. They're just putting it off till tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And but yet we're giving all this money. That's why I don't. If it was me, I wouldn't give very many incentives, because I just don't feel that we're prepared to collect for our infrastructure that we have to provide. And they're talking about a $3 trillion infrastructure. Well, they don't know how they're going to pay for it. They weren't even raising the gas tax since 1993. So it's very discouraging. Now we're talking $3 trillion that we got to pay back. And I don't know where that's going to come from.
Well, actually, the infrastructure bill would come with rolling back the tax cuts from a few years ago. So that comes with a funding source, but that comes with a lot of controversy before we ever see the light of day on it.
Senator Chittenden, yes, go ahead.
For fear of having Senator Perchlik call me the toll guy, I just want to say one other thing I think we could be discussing in this policy discussion is about how to make our roadways more intelligent, not the next year or the year after, but the technologies exist today to address the concern you have, which is not capturing mileage from just Vermonters or not capturing just 2 or 3 cents at the pump, but instead on segments of our roadways, having people assessed in a dynamic way that doesn't require people sitting in toll booths collecting 50 cents or so on, but a way to send a bill on a quarterly basis for the use of our roadways. It's been used since roads have been built. So I think it's worth, and maybe tying into that exploration study they're looking at for license plate recognition to issue fees and work zones. I think there's a real opportunity there on the 5-10 year horizon to capture some fees to pay for our roadways. I had one other comment related to this, to Chris Roop's presentation, if I may, Senator Mazza.
Go ahead.
And it ties in actually with Anthea's chart that she referenced earlier, which is exactly on point to this discussion. It's something I raised in earlier testimony. I see the benefits or the incentives being targeted on income base for individual consumers, but I want to acknowledge that there's a climate crisis and the CO2 emissions are serious concern, both in reality as well as weighing on people's minds. Did the House, or should we look at incentives that might focus on vehicles that put on more miles on our roadways every year? So there are certain types of cars that are bought, fleet vehicles for businesses, that put on 4 or 5 times as many miles each year because they are messenger vehicles or they are service vehicles. Should we focus on electrifying or incentivizing electrification of those fleets with these models so as to have more immediate impact rather than the consumer-based vehicles, which might only put 5,000 or 6,000 miles per year on it? Is that something that came up in House discussions to Anthea or to Chris Roop?
That's a great question. I'm not sure if they came up in the discussions or not. I know Anthea has been at more of the hearings than I have, so I'm not sure if she picked up on anything, but I don't recall that being a significant topic of conversation. But it's a good question.
My recollection is the same. I was not present for any discussions on that in-house transportation.
Thank you.
I think what we're seeing here is sort of a policy decision made, at least in the preliminary stages, if we're doing incentives to recognize the fact that we have, it was really a form of social justice, so to speak, that the families or the households with a lower income would have the benefit of the subsidy because they don't have the financial capacity to swap out. So it was a way of saying, for considering the small amount of money, how to direct it to households that without it would not have the resources to do it. I don't know about incentives to businesses, or whether there are so much economic advantages to businesses at this point that they're going to start doing it anyway. But that was our discussion, was with a limited amount of money, how to allocate it, and it was based on really assisting Vermont families, many of whom do have commutes to work, live in rural areas, and it was from that perspective that a needs-based policy was implemented for the first slug of money.
A quick follow-up, sir.
Go ahead.
So the federal offset that was done to free up the $5 or $6 million to allow for the EV incentives, is there more federal offset out there for us to, if we saw merit in exploring other electric incentives for fleet-based vehicles?
That may be a good segue to move on to my next chart, which shows you the breakdown of the remaining FHWA funds. So if there's no other questions on this one, I'll move over to the next chart.
Right ahead, Chris. Thanks.
Okay, this one is the first attachment, or the first thing on the committee website. This chart here shows you the agency's funding plan for the $50.4 million that came through the Federal Highway Administration last December. And again, these are the unusually flexible federal dollars that the House has flexed into the maintenance budget this year to free up the $4.775 million for the one-time expenses. So to Senator Kitchell's question earlier, you could see here under the FY21 column, the $1.6 million from the BAA that was programmed for paving. And there are columns here showing how the agency has proposed allocating the funds in FY22 and in FY23 for various projects. Some of these projects are new. Some of these projects are also, utilizing the fact that these are 100% federal dollars to, fund projects that would otherwise be funded with more traditional grants that would require more of a match from the state. So that helps save the state in those respects. But if you go down here to maintenance, the agency proposed spending $8.5 million in maintenance in FY22 and $10.8 million next year in FY23. This box down here reflects the House's changes. So you can see here that they increased that 8.5 million in 22 by 4.775 with a corresponding decrease in FY23. So these would be the new totals. And it's important to note that the maintenance budget is one of those areas where the dollars are not as directly tied to a project the way they are in other areas of the budget. So there's a lot of variables that go into what is actually spent in the maintenance line from year to year. Increasing the federal appropriation does not guarantee that all 4.775 will be spent this year. There may be carry forward ability into future years, but it's hard to predict what will happen on the weather front, for example, next winter, and that can all impact the maintenance budget. So right now there's 15.5 million remaining for FY23 and 24.
But I think the answer would be, yes, you could swap out more. The question is how much you want to apportion over the period of permissible expenditure. So you could say, well, we want to swap out a bit more, because I don't think you haven't maxed out on what you can swap out of maintenance. That's is that a 90 million something?
Yeah, the overall budget, I believe, is 103.
103, okay.
Sorry, Chair Mazza, one
Go ahead.
more.
Yep.
And is this a use it or lose it type scenario? And are we at all at risk of losing it if we don't use it by the 2024 timeline that I think you mentioned?
That's a great question. I would imagine that, whatever we don't obligate by then would have to be returned, but I don't question the ability to find significant eligible expenses to use the dollars.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Next, we're almost finished. We'll turn to the second item, the House one-time list. This is just another breakdown to show you how the 9.775 in one-time expenses that passed the House compares to the initial 5 million of one-time expenses that were included in the governor's recommend. So the most significant driver of the deviation between the House's numbers and the governor's recommend is the addition of the $3 million for town highway aid. On the new PEV incentive program, the administration proposed $2.25 million. The House added $1 million, so that's how you get to 3.25 million. Mileage Smart was not in the governor's recommend, but it is an existing program, and the House added $600,000. So the program can be fully funded and continue its operation throughout FY22. The emissions repair program was not included in the governor's recommend. The House added that $375,000 to fund the program for 1 year. Replace your ride.
I want to just make a comment, or maybe other people have different memory. I thought the emission repair turned out to be so complicated. And the caps, I mean, Sue Minter, they struggled with it and it never got implemented. So maybe we need to understand what, is my recollection wrong? It seems like that was something that we put in the Senate side with the best of intentions, but to administer it, the complexity, working out the logistics. So are we putting money into a program that we've figured out how to administer it, or is this a hope and a prayer kind of a appropriation?
Yeah.
So Senator Kitchell, your recollection is spot on. This was something that was included in the 2019 T-bill. It was going to be done in conjunction with Mileage Smart by the Community Action Network agencies. The language that you will see when we get to the T-bill pulls out all of the emissions repair language from the program that became Mileage Smart, and instead adds it in session law as a new program to be administered by the Agency of Transportation and the Department of Environmental Conservation. This 375 number came from those entities. And I think probably when you hear testimony on these sections from the administration, you'll understand what they think is doable and how much they think it will cost to have the program up and running. And they would be using a contractor that is not Capstone for the administration of the program.
Okay, all right. I was
So
just
stay tuned.
wondering.
We'll hear a lot more on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
So the Replace Your Ride program was proposed by the administration at $1.5 million. The House made no changes. The electric motor assisted bike incentive program, the House added $50,000. And the intent of that it would be administered through the existing new BEV incentive program. And lastly,
Are there conditions that go with that? In other words, are we buying recreational e-bikes, or is there a condition that somehow they're being used to replace cars for commuters? Is it, is there, what's the policy basis behind this? Is there some analysis to that?
I can jump in on this one. So there are two ways in the T-bill language that came over from the House where someone could get an electric bicycle incentivized. One is through the Replace Your Ride program, which is a new program. And that's the one that is encouraging people to make a swap to disable an existing low efficiency vehicle, which is defined, and switch to a cleaner form of transportation, one of which could be an electric bicycle. And those incentive amounts can be up to $3,000. And then the e-bike incentives are available to anyone who self-certifies that they meet the higher income levels, which would be up to $100,000 adjusted gross income, or up to $125,000 adjusted gross income for a married couple, would be able to get $200 off an electric bicycle of any MSRP value. And that is available for 250 incentives at $200.
I hope that we see with all this money that we're spending for bike pass and electric vehicles and electric bikes and all of that, which is a vast amount of money. I hope we start to see the numbers climb as far as people actually joining these programs, and other than just increasing the incentives for one specific vehicle. It would be nice to see them climb. I'm always going back to the testimony we took from the guy from UVM that said that all that what we're doing, we're still emitting CO2s at a higher level than New York State per capita. I hope we're in the right direction with this.
Senator Madden?
well, yep, go ahead.
Yes, thanks. So I just put a bookmark, or I don't know what the right term is, and I mentioned to Liz that we asked the Department of Public Service to come in, and I don't know if they took testimony, Anthea or Chris, you can let us know on this, on both the electric bikes, but also the new EV incentive program, how that's interplaying with the renewable energy standards and the requirements we have for the utilities to offer these incentives. So we're telling the utilities, do these programs, offer incentives, but then we're offering incentives on top of that. And I want to know from the department how they're viewing state incentives as it relates to what the utilities are required to do. Like
They're probably stacking them.
Yeah, are the utilities kind of free riding on the state incentive, or are we kind of deducting that from their credit because we're the ones actually doing it, even though they're the ones kind of administrating it? So like having Riley Allen come in and talk about that, or maybe it's TJ Poor, that would be helpful, I think.
I can say that I was not present in House Transportation when they took testimony on that. And I'm also interested in it with the, different obligations under the tiers.
Yeah, I think that I would agree that we should take some more testimony.
Okay, we'll do that. All right.
I have two final comments on this sheet. One is, the administration proposed $1 million for level 2 electric vehicle charging stations for grants for their installation. The House recommended no changes to that. And the administration recommended $250,000 for dealer incentive and training efforts for dealers that sell plug-in electric vehicles. My recollection is that the House took some testimony on this question and determined that the objective can be met with some existing resources. So the House eliminated that $255,000 increase. So when you total everything up, the column here says as proposed, adds up that 5 million. The middle column there reflects the 4.775 of changes that the House made, and it rolls into that new total that you saw on sort of the summary sheet I put up earlier of 9.775. Are there any further questions on this document?
I don't see any. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
My final document that's on the website is the third one, as passed by House prior year. And this is just a chart that I think you all have seen over the years that compares as passed appropriations to prior levels. So as I noted earlier, the House really made very few changes to the governor's recommend for FY22. The changes that were made show up in red text here. So you can see that, going from the $5 million proposal in the one-time line to 9.775. That's also reflected in the total of VTrans programming. And the increase is 4.775. And that increase, again, is driven by the additional use of that FHWA funding. And this chart reflects all funds for as passed appropriations. So you can see that there are some sizable increases in funding in paving and with some of the other program development items. A lot of that's project driven. Before my time, I know that last year was sort of an unusual year, and a lot of projects had their timing delayed or postponed or otherwise disrupted due to COVID. And the fiscal pressures that caused. So, again, this chart reflects as passed appropriations and not actual appropriations. For FY21, actual appropriations would have been, or actual expenditures would have been significantly less. But, for timing reasons, some of that work that may have been paused last year is carrying over into FY22. And I know the administration, when they come in to testify on each of these areas of their budget, they'll be able to detail that in greater detail. But that's the overview of how the FY22 T-bill compares with the GovRec in prior years. And this again reflects all funds. So if you have any questions on this or any other documents I've shared, I'm happy to answer them either now or later. Feel free to reach me by email. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good presentation. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. And Thea, did you want to continue on this discussion? I know you're up for the 1031 or 1045, how would you like to handle it?
It's completely up to you. I was just gonna go back to where we had left off yesterday and finish the walkthrough of the language that actually passed. I don't know if you want to take a break or if you want to jump into that.
Do that now, or the committee want to take a break now?
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't mind taking a break. Obviously, since we've been talking about the money and the changes, which relatively speaking are fairly minor, it would be helpful to have Michelle just tell us the administration what their position is on any of the changes.
Yeah, we're going to have her do that.
I'm only talking about the money changes. That's all right now.
Yeah. Okay. Is Michelle with us this morning?
Yes, I am, Senator.
Before we get to Anthea, would you like to just grab onto those few those little notes about the money part?
Absolutely. I think that Chris provided you an overview of which changes were initiated by the administration and which changes were initiated by the House Committee on Transportation. And I would say that probably not unexpectedly, we support the governor's recommend. And that, there were a few programs that were added, such as the e-bike incentives, the increased investment level for the EV incentives. I think the House increased that by $2 million. The Mileage Smart program, which we felt as though there were adequate resources within the existing funds that remain in Mileage Smart to get through at least until budget adjustment to see and have a better view of how that program performs, because it got such a late start with the fact that we were waylaid by COVID. And while they've had a pretty good uptick of folks using the program in the past month and a half, I think we still don't have strong data to rely upon in terms of how well that program will perform. The emissions repair program, we did not propose to advance that program at that investment level. We did provide the information about what it would cost, and you'll hear more from Commissioner Walk and Commissioner Manoli on this program next week. And then I think other than that, the town highway aid investments were the other major shift in funding from what the governor proposed, and the addition of one-time investments, and then the structural realignment of the funding going forward for town highway structures in Class 1 would create out-year budget pressures for the agency in terms of, having the availability of T funds to match what we anticipate may be around $70 million annually in new federal funds coming to the state under the transportation reauthorization bill. So those were some of the highlights that we noted, and you'll have more testimony from our staff relative to those details as we go through the policy walkthrough over the next week and a half.
Yep.
So Michelle, on the cap increase, they're making it permanent. Obviously, with this big slug of money, it's sort of like how would the administration view moving the cap for this period of time where there's federal money coming in to, but not make it permanent?
Yeah, I think, we would be more comfortable with being able to address it on an annual basis versus a permanent structural adjustment, and I understand
I'm always nervous about permanent because you never take it back. And
oh, yes, we do. We notwithstand so much.
Yeah.
Not so much in transportation, but
once you get it, it's pretty hard to take it back.
It may be, but let me tell you, when it comes down in other areas, but transportation, yes, it does. All it does is compete with the state infrastructure.
I'd rather see them send a check and say this is a one-time bonus or whatever, but once you put it in there, I can hear the fight now. Well, we got it last year, and we need it this year, and not that we don't want to help, but I don't think that's the proper way of setting the base. Anyway, we'll have a discussion on that as we hear more. Okay, well, good. That at least gives us the highlights, and then we'll get into the details of much more as we go through the bill. So
I think the other consideration here probably, and it was something that came in very late after House, and that is the amount of federal money that's flowing directly to towns under the federal rescue plan. And I think it's like $175 million that is flowing out. And I know Burlington, because MPO gets a separate, I think it's, 20 million or something. So we probably may want to look at some of the decisions relative to that flow of federal money that's going out to municipalities relative to this discussion.
And then other than the MPOs, have we heard of what the breakdowns are per town yet? Have those numbers got out?
I think I'm not sure they've been finalized because we don't have really county structures. And so the thinking is that the county money, which is actually more, would be distributed out to municipalities based on, the population on a per capita basis. So I don't think that that's been finalized. And the big problem is if it all moves out to the towns, then we've got our waste management districts, which are municipalities. We've got, I think probably in many areas, the court buildings, if you wanted to do capital, those are owned by the county or the sheriff's offices. So there's some, I don't know whether towns will come together and try to say, well, these municipalities serve all our towns and share some of the wealth. I have no idea how that's going to work, to be honest, Russ.
Okay, all right. This time, I think we will take a 15-minute break and we'll get back with Anthea around 10:30, 10:35, something like that. Okay? Thank you very much.